You ever have one of those moments where you look around at your life and think, wait, how did I get here? Not in a bad way, necessarily. Just in that slow realization kind of way. That was me. No big, dramatic moment. No midlife crisis with a drastic haircut or a plane ticket to Bali. Just a slow fade, so gradual I didn't even notice it was happening. Until one random afternoon, while cleaning out the garage, I found an old vision board buried in a box. And let me tell you, that thing hit me like a truck. Because staring at those faded words, dreams I had long forgotten, was like staring at a version of myself I barely recognized. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure if she would even recognize me. Before it all changed, my name is Emma Carter. I'm 34 years old, a full-time mom to 2 tornadoes disguised as children, Lily, 6, and Noah, 3. I've been married to Jake for 8 years. He's a good man, a great father, and a hard-working guy who throws himself into his job like it's his life's mission. And me? Well, I throw myself into everyone else. That's what being a mom is, right? You love, you give, you sacrifice. You become the person who keeps everything running: school lunches, pediatrician appointments, permission slips, last-minute grocery runs because someone forgot to mention we were out of milk. The thing is, I didn't mind. At least, not at first. Motherhood was consuming in a way I hadn't expected. Those early years with the babies? Pure survival mode. Sleep deprivation, diapers, schedules. I poured everything into them, believing that's just what moms did. My time, my energy, my identity, it all got wrapped up in this role. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being Emma. It was never intentional. I didn't choose to disappear. It was just a slow unraveling. One moment, I was the girl who booked spontaneous weekend trips, always had a notebook filled with ideas for a book she swore she'd write someday, and carried her camera everywhere like it was an extension of her body. The next, I was the woman who hadn't read a book in years, whose world revolved around other people's schedules, who heard her husband talk about his big work projects with passion and realized she couldn't remember the last time she had been passionate about something. The shift was so quiet, so sneaky, I didn't even notice it was happening. But I felt it. I felt it in the way my days blurred into each other, an endless loop of chores and responsibilities. I felt it in the pang of jealousy when I saw old coworkers chasing careers I had once dreamed of. I felt it when I caught my reflection in the mirror one day and realized I barely recognized the woman staring back. The worst part? I didn't know what to do about it. The moment that woke me up that afternoon in the garage, I wasn't searching for some deep, existential revelation. I was just trying to clear out some old junk. Jake had been saying for months that we needed to make space. I figured I'd finally tackle the mess before he made a big deal out of it. I was halfway through sorting random boxes when I saw one labeled Emma's stuff. That should have been my first clue, because apparently, Emma's stuff had been sitting untouched for years. Curious, I opened it. Inside, I found little fragments of my old self. A worn-out travel journal with notes from the solo trip I took to New York when I was 24. My old DSLR camera, tucked away like some relic of another lifetime. A stack of notebooks filled with half-written stories and ideas I barely remembered jotting down. And then, at the bottom, I found it. My vision board. It was old, the edges curling, but the words I had carefully glued onto it years ago were still there, staring back at me like ghosts of a past life. Write a book. Start a creative business. Travel alone. Live boldly. I froze. For a few seconds, I just sat there, staring, my heart pounding in my ears. Because in that moment, it hit me, really hit me, how much I had let go of. It wasn't just the dreams themselves. It was the fact that I had forgotten I even had them. How does that happen? How do you go from being a woman full of fire, full of ambition, full of life, to someone who barely thinks about herself at all? I felt this tightness in my chest, like grief, like something inside me was mourning the person I used to be. I traced my fingers over the words. Write a book. Start a creative business. Travel alone. Live boldly. God, I used to want so much. And now? Now I was just, here. Stuck in a cycle of routines. A wife. A mother. A woman who existed for everyone but herself. I should have put the board back in the box, shoved it aside, and gone back to my day. That would have been easier. But I couldn't. Because something inside me had woken up. And suddenly, for the first time in years, I wanted more. I didn't know what that meant yet. I didn't know where to start. But I knew one thing, I couldn't keep living like this. I had to find her again. Because Emma, the real Emma, was still in there somewhere. And I was finally ready to go looking for her. I couldn't stop thinking about that damn vision board. That night, as I lay in bed next to Jake, who was already snoring lightly, dead to the world, I stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning. Write a book. Start a creative business. Travel alone. Live boldly. It was like seeing a ghost of myself. A woman who used to dream, who used to believe she was meant for something more. But was she gone? Or just, buried? The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat down with a cup of coffee and an empty notebook. No meal plans. No grocery lists. Just me and a blank page. I clicked my pen, hesitated, and then wrote 3 words at the top of the page. What do I want? And the weirdest thing? I had no idea. I sat there, staring at the paper, and felt ridiculous. I used to be so sure of what I wanted. And now? Now my biggest daily goal was making sure my kids ate something green and that nobody smeared peanut butter on the walls. I needed to start small. So, I flipped the question, what did I used to love? That was easier. Writing. Photography. Traveling. Spontaneous adventures. I circled the first 2. Those, at least, I could do without appending my entire life. And right there, in that quiet morning moment, I made a decision. I was going to find my way back to me. The first step feels like a free fall, turns out. Making the decision to change is easy. Actually doing it? That's where the panic sets in. The first thing I did was sign up for an online writing class. Nothing crazy, just a self-paced course about storytelling. The moment I hit enroll, I felt this rush, like I had just thrown myself off a cliff. What am I doing? Who do I think I am? But under all that self-doubt, something else flickered. Excitement. The second thing I did? I dug my old DSLR camera out of the garage, dusted it off, and charged the battery. The moment I held it in my hands again, something clicked into place. The feel of it, the weight, this used to be an extension of me. I took it outside, started snapping random pictures, Lily playing in the yard, the way the sunlight filtered through the trees, Noah's tiny hands clutching his favorite toy. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was actually seeing things again. Not just existing. Not just moving through the motions. But seeing. Jake doesn't get it. The first real roadblock wasn't the kids, or my schedule, or even my own doubts. It was Jake. One night, after I had put the kids to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, scribbling in my notebook, just little writing exercises, nothing serious, when he walked in. He glanced at me, then at the open laptop beside me. What are you working on? I hesitated. Just, writing stuff. He frowned. For what? I bit my lip. For me. That answer did not compute. He pulled out a chair, sitting across from me. Wait, so, like a hobby? I exhaled. I don't know yet. I just know I need to do it. There was a long pause. Then he said, I just don't get why you need this. That stung. I tried to explain it, how I felt lost, how I needed something for myself, how this wasn't about him or the kids, but about not disappearing into motherhood like I didn't exist outside of it. His response? But aren't we enough? God. That guilt hit like a freight train. I had no words. I just sat there, feeling like the worst wife, the worst mom, the most selfish person on the planet. Because how do you explain to the people you love most that loving them isn't the problem? The problem was losing yourself. The conversation that changed everything. A few days later, I met up with my mom for coffee. She could tell something was off the second I sat down. What's wrong? She asked, stirring her tea. I sighed. I think I'm being selfish. She raised an eyebrow. Okay. Explain. So, I told her everything. The vision board. The writing class. The way Jake didn't understand why I needed this. When I finished, she just looked at me. Then she said, Emma. Do you remember when you were little, and you'd watch me paint? I blinked. Yeah. I loved painting, she said, staring into her cup. But when I had you and your sister, I stopped. I told myself I didn't have time, that it wasn't important. But you know what? I leaned in. What? She met my eyes. I regret it. Not because I wasn't a good mom, I loved being your mother more than anything. But because I wish you had seen me doing something I loved. I wish I had shown you that being a mom didn't mean giving up who you are. My throat tightened. She reached for my hand. You're not being selfish, sweetheart. You're showing your kids that their mom is a whole person. And that's a good thing. I swallowed hard. For the first time since this all started, I let go of the guilt. Little wins start adding up after that. I owned my decision. I set boundaries. Every Sunday morning. That was my time. I'd take my notebook and camera, head to a little coffee shop, and just be. At first, the kids didn't get it. Where are you going, Mommy? Lily asked one morning, frowning. I'm going to do something I love, I said, kissing her forehead. But I'll be back soon. She tilted her head. Like an adventure? I smiled. Exactly. That made her grin. And Jake? It took time, but he started to come around. One night, as I was finishing up an article I was submitting to an online magazine, holy crap, right? He came up behind me, rested a hand on my shoulder, and said, Hey. I'm proud of you. I nearly cried. Then, I did something crazy one day. On a whim, I booked a solo weekend trip. Nothing huge, just a short drive to a little town by the coast. A cozy Airbnb. My camera. My notebook. Just me. The night before I left, Lily hugged me tight. Mommy, I can't wait to hear about your adventure. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't leaving my family behind. I was showing them how to live. And for the first time in years, I felt alive too. The first morning of my solo trip, I woke up to the sound of waves. No tiny voices calling Mommy. No dishes clattering in the kitchen. No mental to-do list firing off the second I opened my eyes. Just me, tangled in white sheets, bathed in soft morning light, listening to the ocean breathe. For the first time in years, I had nowhere to be. And that feeling? It was terrifying. I sat up slowly, stretching, and let the realization sink in. I had done it. I had left. Even if it was just for a weekend, even if it was just a small town a few hours away, I had chosen myself. The old me would have been proud. The current me? She wasn't sure what to do next. A day that changed everything. I grabbed my notebook, my camera, and a coffee from the little cafe down the street. Then I wandered. No plan, no schedule, just me and my instincts. I took pictures of everything: the sleepy streets, the way the sun hit the water, an old couple sitting on a bench, laughing like they were still teenagers. At one point, I found a tiny bookstore and stepped inside, letting my fingers trail over the spines of books. My breath caught when I reached a section labeled Local Writers. I stared at those books, my heart pounding. One day, I thought. One day, my name could be here. And for the first time in forever, I didn't just wish for it, I believed it could happen. That afternoon, I sat by the shore with my journal. I wrote without overthinking. No grocery lists. No reminders for school meetings. Just thoughts, memories, dreams, some old, some new. And as the words spilled onto the page, I felt something shift. I wasn't just Emma the mom anymore. I was Emma the writer. Emma the photographer. Emma the woman. Emma. Coming home different when I walked through the front door Sunday evening, I braced myself. Jake had managed the kids all weekend, and I half expected chaos: crayons on the walls, dishes piled to the ceiling, Noah wearing his pajamas backward. Instead, the house was quiet. Peaceful. Lily was the first to see me. She gasped and ran full speed into my arms. "Mommy. Did you have an adventure?" I laughed, hugging her close. "I did, sweetheart. A really great one." Jake stood in the doorway, watching me. I met his gaze, searching for, I don't know, judgment? Frustration? A sarcastic, "Did you find yourself?" But I didn't see any of that. I saw something else. Curiosity. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I found him in the kitchen, washing dishes. He glanced over his shoulder. "So, how was it?" I leaned against the counter. "Honestly? Life-changing." A small smile tugged at his lips. "Yeah?" I nodded. I needed it. More than I even realized. He shut off the sink, wiped his hands on a towel, and turned to face me fully. "I get it now." I blinked. "You do?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I know I haven't been great about all this. But seeing you like this," he gestured to me. "You look different. Lighter." I swallowed. "I feel different." He stepped closer. "I guess I was scared that if you started wanting more, you'd start wanting less of us." I reached for his hand. "Wanting something for myself doesn't mean I don't want our life. It means I need to be in it as a whole person." He nodded slowly. Then he said something I never expected. "What if we both start making time for things outside of work and kids?" My breath hitched. "Like what?" "I don't know." He smirked. "I used to love playing guitar. Haven't picked it up in years." I squeezed his hand. "Then maybe it's your turn." He kissed my forehead. "Maybe it is." The ripple effect that was 6 months ago. Since then, so much has changed. I finished my writing course. I submitted my first article to an online magazine, and they published it. I started a small photography Instagram, just for fun. Jake actually did pick up his guitar again. The kids love it. Lily calls it Daddy's magic music. And the biggest thing? I don't feel lost anymore. I'm still a mom. I'm still a wife. But I'm also Emma. And that makes me better at everything. The other night, as I was tucking Lily into bed, she looked up at me with those big, curious eyes and asked, "Mommy, can I have an adventure like you when I grow up?" I smiled. "Sweetheart, you don't have to wait until you grow up." She grinned. "Then I want to write a book, too." I kissed her forehead. "Then you will." And just like that, I realized, this wasn't just for me. By choosing to live fully, I was teaching my kids that they could, too. Your turn if you've ever felt lost in your own life. I see you. If you've ever felt guilty for wanting something just for you. I get it. But let me tell you this, you are allowed to exist outside of the roles you play. You are allowed to want more. So tell me, what's something you used to love that you want to get back to? Because trust me, it's never too late to find yourself again.